Okay, so one of the things that I remember kind of really trying to navigate and figure out in my early 20s was friendships. And I'm excited to say, I feel like I've got some friends, so there's good news. But what would you say, like, how have you cultivated long-term friendships? What are some things that you've done to cultivate that, to work through conflict, that kind of thing? And what do you do when it just doesn't work out? What are your thoughts on that? You can start with any of those. That was that was like 3 questions in one. So let's start with cultivating long-term friendships. What does that look like for you?
For me, intentional pursuing of different friends has been really key. And so, calling, planning trips, we live across the country. Usually these are high school or college friends, from that time. And just, you kind of find out who's going to be in it with you for the long haul. And what I've found is that we would call, and maybe we hadn't talked in a month or whatever, and the Lord would be doing the same thing in both of us at the same time, which was kind of cool. And so the friendships, just one other thing I think about that is in the quality of the friendships, I'm always looking for the good in them, and bringing that out. It never hurts to say something that you observe in someone else and to encourage them. How we feel if we leave someone's presence and they've made us feel loved, and encouraged. I think that's really important in friendships, to be calling those things out.
Yeah, it's good.
Definitely intentionality. I love that word. If you're going to go the distance with anybody, you have to be intentional. I remember probably 15 years ago, we had left a church and my entire friend group was at the church. And we felt like God was asking us to move to a different church, all of these different reasons. But at one point, I sat across the table with a friend of mine from that church and said, well, we just have to, we don't get the luxury anymore of just seeing each other when in church functions. We have to be intentional if we're going to build this. And that's what we did. You just have to. You have to prioritize those people that you see the good in them and you see that you have a heart connection to them. You just have to sow into it for it to continue to grow.
And there's that factor of risk too. You take a risk when you're putting yourself out there to meet friends. First of all, to even meet friends. Like I am friends today with a kindergartner that I met at 4.5 years old going into kinder. But it was a risk. She said, I can't sit next to you. My mom said not to sit next to anyone coughing, and you're coughing and you're sick, so I can't sit next to you. And I was like, okay. And, we became the best friends, and we are still friends today. But it has taken a lot of intentionality. It's seen a lot of ups and downs, rocky roads. Seen the fights and the jealousy and the competitiveness and the comparison. But is it worth it? It is worth it. But that intentionality and being willing to take a risk.
Yeah.
That story of leaving your church and then you're being intentional. The Lord called me out of leading some things in a church. And when there's times when you feel like everything disappears and you have all this space and you're like, well, what am I supposed to do now? And then you find out a month or two later that all this other stuff is coming into your life. And that's how it happens for me anyway. And I kind of in hindsight see. But what was interesting, I was leading Bible study with probably 30 other women. And some of these women I knew really well. And when I wasn't doing that anymore, I didn't get one phone call. And I was just, I had invested in other relationships, but it really showed me something that, okay, these are friends that are here for a reason. They weren't doing anything wrong. It just kind of put it in context what the level of friendship was. And I have a mentor who says people are in your life for a reason, for a season, or for life. And being able to discern which category people are in.
Yep.
Not that you have to pigeonhole somebody, but you can kind of see that pattern happen.
Yeah. I think too with friendships, this is like any other topic. There's like about 10 things that we could, start talking about, like the position of a friendship. Exactly to your point. I remember being incredibly disappointed in a friend one time where I felt like they should do something that they just weren't engaging in. And a mentor said to me, everyone sits, you are on the stage of your life. You are the star in your play. And people choose their seats and they choose the front row and they pay extra. There's a cost to have a front row seat in your life, And so some people, that cost is not, they don't want to pay that cost. And you're expecting them to. And you have to allow them the freedom too to have the seat that they want. And I was devastated in that moment because I was like, but I am a front row seat for this person. Like, that is who I am. And she said, well, she's not in yours. And that's okay. Like, you have to have grace for that. And so it doesn't mean let people take advantage of you. It doesn't mean no boundaries, but it was very eye-opening. Like, okay, people do have these different, and I don't know, all the people in their life. I mean, you have a friend from kindergarten, right? And so thinking in terms of how many people are in someone's life and the things that they've walked through together and your expectations of them. But it was just like, okay, I need to be clear about what my hope and expectation is, not only to them, not that I would ever say, that's kind of a weird thing to say, because it's not like I would be like, this is what I expect you to do in my life. But like, as we're cultivating this, maybe an understanding of that, but also to myself and just be real.
Yeah. There's
I
so
felt
much
like that was
freedom in
one.
that, knowing that there's a reality where this person may be here forever.
Yeah.
They may be here for a season, or they may be here for just a church group or a job. What about people that we're friends with on the job, and you're friends with them for a little period of time and they leave or and they're gone, and giving them that freedom too. Same thing with me. I had a friend, in fact, we were family friends. Our family, had children around the same age together, always did things together. And then, they kind of fell off. And we're with this other family doing all the things that we were doing before. And my husband was like, we just got to let them go.
Yeah.
We got to give them that freedom. And we did. And now we're still friends, but it just looks different.
Yeah.
So in that, can we acknowledge that we all know that there are people in our lives for certain seasons of our lives, but it still sometimes hurts?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, what did I do wrong? Did I do anything wrong? Or you grieve a friendship. Maybe you had a best friend for 10 years when your kids were little because their kids were little, and then all of a sudden they moved away, or their kids, did X, Y, Z, and for some reason, or you left a church. You can grieve that.
Yeah.
It's not that maybe no one did anything wrong.
Yeah.
It was just God had ordained that time and that season for you to be the besties to get through whatever season of life you were in. And then maybe it just kind of naturally ran its course.
Yep.
But it's okay to grieve that, to go back and say, maybe like in our other topic of conversation, the gratitude, like just, Lord, thank you that so-and-so was in my life for that season. She helped me with this, that, or the other. And thank you for that. And I bless them. And I, bless
so
them
good.
for who we're not always designed to be one person's best friend for the rest of their life and vice versa.
We
It's
grow
okay.
at different rates. We experience life at different rates. I mean, all of it. It would be really difficult, I think, to
Yeah.
have one set, person forever and ever. I mean, I think we definitely have good friendships, but I don't know. I think too, in thinking about letting go, and I am cautious in how I say this because I think I don't want to put any kind of comparison thing there. I've never actually had like a breakup with a friendship until about a year ago, where I was connected to some people through a job, and I worked really hard to make that work for a long time. I mean, like really hard, got some help, through it, all of that, and just realized this really is just not gonna work. And I mean, I'm turning 50 in July, And I really grieved that because I've had friendships fizzle over time, distance, someone moved, life stages. Like, I mean, I have people that I was really close with, but when I see them, I mean, there's just love between us. Like, oh, I love you and you love me, and nothing happened, there was no big thing, but whatever, But this one is different. And I think even the grief in those two ways, where you grieve the distance and the time, and you go, I miss that season. We had a season of life when we first started, when we were first married and we had toddlers. We had this group of friends, and we're still friends to this day. All of us were all still friends, and we did life together. We were very vulnerable. We cleaned each other's houses. We had a babysitting co-op. We cooked meals for 30 days at a time. Like, we did life together. And then our son passed away, and they were there for that. And so we did the deep, hard, ugly things. And not everybody made it through that. Like, that was really difficult. And not everyone wants to do that with you either. And I don't even think they could say it that way. And I don't have any ill will. It's just a lot, you know what I'm saying, to walk through that. But my point is that, I mean, we call ourselves the OGs, well, I nicknamed us that. I don't know. But anyway, but we've just, we've maintained that for a really long time. I think I would be way more devastated, obviously, if one of those friendships, ended. But there are people that, moved away, and I grieve that. Like, oh, I miss those seasons. I just said to Casey yesterday, I don't ever want to get pregnant again. I'm, 50 now, but man, I miss those seasons of littles and the friendships and the way you have to depend on people because you're like, I'm going to pull my hair out. I think it's actually a little bit more difficult the older we get to maintain a level of vulnerability because we don't need people as much because we don't have little people running around, or
That's a good point.
We're not confused in marriage the same way, maybe. Now we've been married for a long time and we're kind of settled in. And when you're young,
You need everybody.
you need everybody. You're just like, help, So what have you done now to maintain friendships?
I'm going back to the intentionality and being proactive. And just like we talked about before, being a doer of what we know to do, even when we're not sure what the outcome is going to be.
Yeah.
It is, I feel like friendship is a risk.
Yeah.
It is a risk.
It is. And it can feel like we're always the ones initiating. We're always the ones inviting. And I remember thinking that for a while, and my husband and I were talking about that. And then we thought, well, so what? This is what we want to do. And that's what's really freeing is no one else is controlling what I get to do. These are decisions we make before the Lord. What do we want to do? Where do we want to invest? And so that's fine if we're the initiators. We had one couple that was part of our home group, and they were so thankful that we would just initiate in terms of like, hey, can we come over? We'll just hang after the kids are down or whatever. And we're older than they are. And we were just shocked at how much that ministered to them, that they're like, nobody does this. They're always kind of leaning on us for things. And no one just thinks of us to that way, So,
Yeah, that's good. Investing in people. I think friendship takes a lot of vulnerability too. I was wondering if anybody was going to touch that one with a 10-foot pole or what, but I just think that you have to be, when you find your people, I think, and by vulnerability, I don't mean throwing up on everyone, but being real. So I have a friendship. We became friends when I moved to Memphis in 2007 or 8. We became friends. And her husband actually passed away totally unexpectedly in the middle of the night 4 years ago. And he wasn't even 50. I mean, he was 49, I think, when he passed away. And so we've walked through some things. But when I met her in 2007, Cameron had only been gone 7 years. I was still in the throes of figuring out all of that. And we did a lot of, we did this mentorship program together, but we connected in a way that I had actually never connected with another friend. Like, it was immediate, it was fast, and it was deep. And funny enough, we connected over the word because we're both a little bit weird and we get excited about these stories and we're like, can you believe? And do you think he thought this? And, we would get passionate or whatever. But one thing that made that friendship very different from the beginning is that in that season, I was like, this is a new friendship. So she didn't walk through this really hard thing with me. So I'm gonna be intentional about still being vulnerable, if that makes sense, and like really laying it out there. So we have remained friends. We've walked through this thing. Well, in this last year, obviously everything that has happened in our life has been incredibly difficult. And so now, she's walking a little bit more beside me, but we have this shared grief. And it's different, but neither of them are natural, if that makes sense. These things shouldn't happen. People should live to be 78 or 80 or whatever, So we have this shared thing. So I had a moment where I could absolutely identify the feeling wasn't real. I could absolutely identify that I didn't want to act on the feeling that I was having, but it was overwhelming me, this feeling. And I didn't want to admit to anyone that I was having this feeling because I'm supposed to have it all together somehow. I'm supposed to be in this different phase. And I thought, I have to tell someone this. Like, I have to admit it so that I can walk through it. Because if I don't admit it and I bury it, I'm afraid of what's going to happen. Over 60% of people who lose a child become addicted to something, or like porn, alcohol, drugs, or they cheat, or they leave their spouses or something, because it's like a screaming toddler. It's just like nonstop, the noise of it. You just like, what can I put on my ears that will just make it quiet, So it was one of those situations, not going into too much detail, except to say, I called her and I was like, this is the thought. It was really incredibly hard to say that out loud. I was just like, what would people think if I said this out loud? Like, oh, and I said it. And you know what her response was? Oh my gosh, so what? Like, that's it. That's the thought, because with everything that's happening right now, that is so normal. This is what your brain is doing. Your brain is like in survival mode, and your brain is like, how can I feel better? How can I feel better? How can I feel better? She just normalized it. She didn't go, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're having that thought and I'm so sorry. She was like, so? Literally, that was her kind of answer. And it just like, it made it so normal, and it made me go, oh, okay, I'm not crazy. Okay. This is going to be okay. I don't really feel this way or want to do this thing or whatever, in this moment. She ends up talking to me for about an hour. I get off the phone and I'm like, that's friendship. And I'm not saying that every friendship has to be defined that way. I don't think it can, if that makes sense. I don't think you can have that many people in your life that are that way. But she essentially talked me off a ledge in such a beautiful, sweet, normal way, and never made me feel, anything about it. And I just thought, this is like, we've cultivated this. I mean, we've been friends since 2007, almost 20 years, right?
Right.
Is that right? That's weird. Whoa, she's like one of my newer friendships, right? But it was just really, really profound to me. And I thought, I just don't know what I would do without community. I don't know how we make it through things without that, but it does take, to your point, risk.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of vulnerability to say the ugly. It's just the ugly.
And I love that you take the risk and you're vulnerable, even beyond what your flesh wants. Like, your flesh is saying, don't tell anybody that at all. But when you push through and you can trust the other person enough to be that vulnerable, how the friendship just went to a deeper level at that point. It was the very opposite of what you were afraid of. What you were afraid of was, oh my goodness, what is this person going to think? But instead, it just made the friendship go even deeper.
Yeah, it's true.
I loved what you said about normalize. Our friends help us feel normal. They help us feel okay. It's going to be okay.
Yeah. And they tell you who you really are. Like, that was the other beautiful part, is she was like, so you're having this thought. You're not going to do it, and it's not you. And I was like, well, what if I do it? What if I do the thing? And she goes, what if you do? Like, then what's going to happen? And I was like, well, then this and this and this. And she was like, and then what's going to happen? And then it turned into a big faith conversation. Is Jesus still on the throne? Like, if that happens, And she was like, I wouldn't want you to do it. It wasn't condoning it. It was just like, let's talk all the way through it and remember who you are and remember your core value. Like, at the end of the day, is this still who you are? And I was like, that is who I am. You're right. So yeah, they help us feel normal,
Yeah.
and they remind us of who we are. For sure. Well, if you could go back and tell your 20-something-year-old self one thing about the hardship of friendships and how you navigate through conflict, what would you say?
Just one thing.
Okay, we're women. Never just one thing. Never just one thing.
No, what you were talking about being vulnerable, the scripture talks about it in the sense of you offer a pearl, and Jesus said, don't throw your pearls before swine. And we kind of stop there because we think, yeah, that's a waste. But he says, lest they turn and trample it and tear you with their teeth. And so you learn, I like to be transparent. Like what you see is what you get. This is who I am. But I'm not vulnerable with everybody because those are my pearls. And so I think I would tell my 20-something-year-old self, get over comparison, deal with it, be honest. If you need to have a conversation, talk about it in terms of this is how I'm feeling, not you did this, this. And because that's where we naturally go, I can't believe they're doing this to me. So forth. But an awkward conversation, 30-minute conversation is worth a lifetime of friendship. So,
Good.
going in and I have found that most people do not know how to do that.
Yeah.
And I had to learn how to do that. I didn't know how to do that. And there's a lot of fear. What's going to happen? Are we breaking up? Is this going, and there might be misunderstanding and some time to work through it, but it's worth it to, I think it's even falls in the category of where Jesus said, as far as it be on you, be at peace with all men. Do what we can, but not everybody they may not be in that time of life, or they haven't had enough growing or exposure to healthy conflict and that sort of thing. So you offer it and then you see what happens.
Yeah, it's good.
Honesty is huge too. Like why carry around an offense? Like we're talking like your friend group. Like it's not just a stranger.
Yeah.
But why carry around an offense that you have because someone said something that they probably don't even remember they said? But I feel like the enemy can get in your mind that way and almost demonize that person instead of just like you said, just taking a couple of minutes and saying, hey, when you said this, is that really what you meant?
Yeah.
I recently had a situation where someone had kind of just shot something off at the hip. I don't think that they meant it to be ugly. I don't think that they were trying to be offensive, and I know they love me. So first off, you have to consider who is saying it and their character. Is this out of character for them? Do you know how they feel towards you? Or is this one of your type people? But then I didn't even have a rebuttal in the moment because I was so shocked because it was so offhanded. And later, I was processing that with my husband, and I thought, we have to have maybe some phrases in our wheelhouse that instead of walking away, I'm so offended and mad at that person, that we can maybe say, even almost in the moment, were you trying to be helpful or hurtful with that statement? Because if they're your friend, they'll be like, oh, no. And it's going to be apology right then. And then nobody has any ought against the other person because it was you're just clearing it up in the moment. But I know sometimes when someone says something just off the cuff, you're just like so taken back. Like, I can't even believe that came out of their mouth.
Yeah.
It'll be better to go back and have a conversation and clear the air because probably if they've been your friend for any length of time and they love you, they're not trying to hurt you. They just didn't think. I mean, there's times when I say stuff that I didn't mean to be hurtful.
Yeah.
But it probably just came out that way. And I think we just have to consider the person that's speaking and know their character behind what they're saying.
I have a friend that says she always wants the chance to apologize. And that is an impactful statement to me because I was like, you're right. I really do always want, I don't intend to hurt people.
Right.
I can't think of a time where I'm like, I'm going to
It's
just
gonna
stab
be
this
ugly.
person right in their heart, But I know that I must hurt people, right? You know that you say or do things, you can see it or feel it, you know. And so I always want to kind of say that in my friendships. But then also I feel like, to your point with having phrases and to your point with being transparent, but not necessarily vulnerable, I think you're kind of weighing to the friendship. So one of the things that I've learned is like, I don't need to reconcile everything with every person all the time. I don't need to. You know, I had literally last night, someone texted me out of the blue from a long time ago in my life that they're not in my life now. And it was a hurtful thing about our son passing. And it was just kind of and maybe we didn't process it super well in the moment. And, well, I want to be careful not to throw anyone under the bus. So anyway, I had some time to just say to Casey, you know, I know this person's heart was this. This was really what this person was trying to convey. Like, I'm thinking about you. You know, they weren't like, ooh, how can I hurt these people who've lost their child, you know? And he was like, you're right. I probably could have had a little more grace, you know, or whatever. So I left him a voice text this morning. Do I want to engage in a conversation with that person? Not necessarily. It's not that I don't, but I'm just saying they're not in my inner, right? But also I don't want them to walk in shame and condemnation. And so I was just like, hey, thanks for reaching out. I know this was your heart. I know this is where you were coming from. I can appreciate that. It was hurtful, but thank you that your heart, you know, that wasn't your intention. So I just want you to know that I know that that wasn't your intention. And I left it at that. And that person was like, thank you so much for sending the voice message. I think it's important to be the person that you want other people to be for you. I think it's important to offer the grace that you hope that you get. So I started it by saying I always want the chance to apologize. Then I better be a person who allows other people to apologize, you know.
Really good.